Success is discovering this innate power and using it daily to deal with whatever challenges come our way. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Kainu!
Good morning, everybody. So, it's been a while since I've talked, and it's been a while since I've talked about fire. So, fire monitoring is an essential part of any business, any structure, and really any business. I mean, if you don't have smoke detection, you have a building that is sprinkled. Okay, so in this building, as an example, you're going to have smoke detection and you'll have a combination of a sprinkler system. Okay, both of which are monitored 24/7. You don't need to arm your system at night when you leave to make your fire system work. It is always working. It has certain requirements that are needed to meet standards for the fire authority to check as far as checking in. So every 24 hours, that panel checks in and says, yes, I'm still working, and yes, I'm still monitoring. When you have a system such as a sprinkled system, you won't see smoke detectors, you won't see heat detectors, because any fire authority, Tacoma, Seattle, Bellevue, Redmond, all these different cities do not require you to have multiple systems. You have one or the other. Sprinkled system is going to cost you 3 times the cost as a smoke detector or heat detector system. And the reason is because you have to run pipe, you have to run it off of a water source. There's water that sits in that pipe, and when the heat reaches or the smoke reaches that sprinkler head, that's how the water is released. You have 2 different kinds of systems. So in most businesses, you'll have a wet system and you'll have a dry system. Wet systems are what you'll find inside, warehouse space, office space, pretty much any retail space. When you find a dry system, is an example, you'll have, let's say, Nordstrom's in downtown Seattle or in the Tacoma Mall, and they have a big cover, big overhang. And those overhangs are, will have sprinkler heads in it. That is going to be a dry system. And the reason it is because it's exposed to the weather. And so if it freezes and that pipe is exposed to cold weather, there'll always be a dry system. What that means is there's no water in that pipe. What literally is holding the water back is a little flutter valve in the standpipe. And so what happens is when heat or smoke is detected, that little flutter valve drops and the water is released. So the thing with the dry system is you want to make sure you have good air pressure, because you'll have an air compressor. And if that air compressor loses pressure, which holds that little flutter valve as well, then you'll get to experience a shower in the middle of the day when you didn't want it. It'll become a wet system very fast. Every fire system is required to be inspected annually. If it's wet, if it's dry, fire extinguishers all have to be inspected annually. If they're not, the fire marshal can actually fine you because it's not. He will give you 30 to 60 days to inspect it, and if you don't, he'll come back and fine you probably about $500, which is about average. It's much cheaper to have the inspection done, I'll just tell you that now. Inspections typically are based off the number of devices you have, as well as the time. So let's use an apartment complex as an example. And it is a fully sprinkled building, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to inspect the wet system, but we don't need to go into each individual unit to make sure the sprinkler heads are functioning, because there's nothing to check. It functions when it detects heat or smoke. On a smoke detector or heat detector system, a conventional system, that's going to actually be set up where you have to go into each individual unit, check each and every smoke detector, heat detector, mini horn, because they'll typically have a little mini horn that makes a bunch of racket in the middle of the night when your fire alarm is set off. Every single device has to be detected. So when you look at that, our time is now multiplied by 3 times to get into each and every unit to check each and every device. If we don't check those devices, we have to explain to the fire marshal why we couldn't get into that unit or into that section of apartment. If we can't justify it, they will not validate the inspection and we will have to go back. So typically what we do on an inspection is we have 2 guys. 2 guys go out, one stands at the panel, one goes around and trips all the different devices. And then he reports back, we've gotten alarm at this plate, we got this zone went into alarm. Apartments are put into zones, not into individual device counts, because you'll have sometimes 240 smoke detectors on one system. When you talk a system, each apartment will typically have 3 to 5 smoke or heat detectors. You'll have one in each bedroom, in the common area, you'll have one in the kitchen. So when we go in and we test these, it's typically on a larger system, a 2-day process to go in and test all this. We work with school districts, we monitor fire systems for Federal Way, Bellevue. We've worked with several different apartment complexes up in the Renton, Bellevue, Seattle areas, commercial buildings. 75–80% of what we have is commercial buildings. We will go into the Provident building as an example down here in Tacoma, over here. And what we'll do is, I'm directionally challenged. We go in, we walk the entire building, we test each and every device, we write the report up, and then we submit it to the city so they have a copy is left at the panel. Fire extinguishers. Something else that's inspected annually. If you're not, you're out, and they will fine you by extinguisher, not a general fine. So you want to have this stuff inspected. I got 2 minutes left. I'm going to open it up for questions. I've kind of gone through a little bit of information pretty quickly, but in regards to fire systems, what questions? Anybody?
When you have a sprinkler system,
Yes.
you talked about you don't have to go check every head.
Yes.
But if it's an apartment building and somebody sets off theirs, do the ones around it go off too, or do they all have to feel the heat before they all start shooting?
So they are sectioned off into what we'll call partitions. So there's areas of sprinklers that go off. So if the second floor sprinkler is activated, the third and the first floor will go off, but not the fourth or the fifth or the basement. So it is partitioned into sections that it'll activate. It won't ruin the entire building.
How common are residential sprinkler systems nowadays?
Actually, they're getting a lot more common because when you talk houses, that sprinkler systems in homes are based off the distance from a fire extinguisher, how hard it is for a fire engine to get to your house, and the time it takes for them to get to your house. So what you'll find on example Mercer Island, every home will have a sprinkled system because number one, the driveways suck to get to the houses. Number two, fire extinguishers or the fire hydrants, thank you, are typically at the end of this driveway that's maybe a half a mile long. And the hoses are too long, so they are required to have a sprinkler system that is also inspected annually. You got a question?
I was gonna ask about, what you can hold if you have, it's not a sprinkle, but,
Smoke detectors?
do those need to be identically as well?
Those should be tested annually. They're not required to be, most people don't. But what we do recommend on those is to be replaced every 7 to 10 years because they actually do lose their sensitivity and their reliability after that 7 to 10 year range. Yeah, it's an added cost, but it's recommended to be done.
All right.
I'll ask you later.